4 cops dragged a vagrant into the rain, laughing as they beat him, never knowing they had just awakened America's most lethal Green Beret sniper. Rain fell in relentless sheets, the kind that turned the city into a mirror of neon streaks and fractured light. Every street lamp shimmered in puddles, every passing car sent waves of dirty water rolling across the cracked pavement. Outside Jerry's 24-hour diner, under the frail protection of a rusted awning, a man sat motionless with a paper cup of coffee long gone cold between his hands. His clothes were worn thin, his boots scuffed, his jacket a tattered military surplus relic with its patches stripped away. To anyone hurrying past, he was just another homeless black man weathering the storm, forgotten by a city that prided itself on never looking down. But those who dared glance into his eyes never forgot the feeling. They were too sharp, too steady, too aware. Elijah Carter did not fidget or twitch the way the street's broken souls often did. He sat like a statue, carved of patience, his spine erect, his gaze fixed on something beyond the visible world. When people passed by, he didn't just see them, he assessed them. The nervous woman clutching her purse, the man who glanced over his shoulder 3 times in 30 steps, the laughing teenagers who thought the night was theirs. Each one cataloged. Each one filed away in a mind that had once measured distances in heartbeats and kills. The rain softened his focus, gave him rhythm to think by. It was almost soothing, almost enough to make him forget the tremor in his fingers that only ever stilled when wrapped around cold steel. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound fill him, until the low growl of a patrol car engine cut through the storm. Blue and red lights stayed dark, but the presence was unmistakable. Tires hissed as the cruiser stopped at the curb in fog. Raunt of the diner. Doors opened with casual authority and 4 men stepped out, their uniforms already damp, their movements carrying the swagger of those who thought the law itself bent around their boots. At their head was Officer Travis Boone, broad-shouldered with a square jaw, the kind of man who smiled only when it came at someone else's expense. His eyes swept the street before fixing on the solitary figure beneath the awning. His lips curled into something that wasn't a smile, but close enough. Well, he drawled, hands dropping lazily to his belt. Look what we got here, boys. This spot's not a hotel, old man. Elijah didn't move, didn't blink. The storm ran down his jacket, plastering his hair to his forehead, but he remained as still as stone. It was his silence that irked Boone most, the lack of fear or acknowledgement. He stepped closer, tapping the baton at his side, his voice hardening. I'm talking to you. You deaf or just stupid? Elijah's voice when it came was quiet, but clear. Each word cut with precision. Neither, sir. The rookie cop, Reynolds, shifted uneasily behind Boone, but the others chuckled. Boone smirked, leaning forward. Oh, we got a smart one. What you got in that bag? Booze? Drugs? Just personal items. Elijah's gaze finally lifted, locking onto Boone's eyes, steady and unblinking. The brief connection made Boone falter, though he covered it quickly with another sneer. He lashed out suddenly, boot connecting with the duffel bag at Elijah's side. It skidded into the gutter, spilling its contents into the rushing water, worn clothes, a toothbrush, a battered paperback. And then, a small metal box clattered against the concrete, its lid cracking open. Inside lay a pair of dog tags, their dull steel glinting beneath the diner's flickering neon. Elijah rose to his feet in one fluid motion that seemed impossible for a man his age and condition. His eyes never left Boone's. His voice, still calm, carried the weight of a command forged long ago. You should put those back. The laughter of the officers died for a moment. The storm pressed in around them, and for the first time it was clear. Elijah Carter wasn't some fragile vagrant to toy with. He was something else entirely, something dangerous, a predator biding his time, wrapped in the skin of a forgotten soldier. Rain continued to sweep across the city as though the sky itself had chosen violence that night. Water streamed down the gutters in filthy rivers, carrying Elijah's spilled belongings away like forgotten relics. The duffel bag bobbed pitifully, its seams stretching, its contents half submerged. Yet Elijah didn't move to recover a single thing. His stillness was more frightening than rage. He simply stood, broad shoulders squared, his shadow long in the neon light. Officer Boone, dripping under his rain-slick cap, smirked as if he had achieved something. What's the matter, old man? He taunted, nudging the scattered items further into the gutter with his boot. Can't afford to lose much, can you? That's the price of being trash on my street. The other officers laughed, but their laughter was hollow. Reynolds, the youngest, lingered behind, his stomach twisting as he watched Elijah's eyes. There was no brokenness there, no shame, just a chilling stillness. The kind of silence that belonged not to prey, but to something waiting for the right second to strike. Boone crouched, snatched up the metal box, and flipped it open with casual disrespect. His laugh turned sharp when he found the dog tags inside. He dangled them between two fingers, letting them clink against each other as the rain plastered his hair flat against his skull. "A military man, huh?" Boone sneered. "That what you were? Some soldier who couldn't hack it out here?" Elijah's jaw tightened, the only visible change in his entire demeanor. His voice, when it came, was soft but carved in iron. "Put those back," Reynolds said. Diaz shivered at the tone. It wasn't a plea, it wasn't even a request, it was a command, the kind that made every instinct scream that to disobey would be a mistake. But Boone wasn't a man who listened to instincts. He dropped the tags into a puddle, watching them vanish under the dirty swirl of water. "Or what, bum? You gonna take on the whole department with that stare?" The other officers chuckled again, louder now, trying to fill the uncomfortable silence. But the silence pressed back harder. Elijah didn't move, didn't lunge, didn't so much as blink. The rain tapped on his shoulders like a ticking clock. His eyes burned into Boone's, and for the first time the sergeant felt a flash of unease. "You deaf again?" Boone jabbed his baton into Elijah's chest, harder this time. "Move along. This sidewalk ain't yours." The baton pressed against bone, but Elijah didn't flinch. He only spoke again. Low and deliberate, so steady that every syllable landed like a hammer. "I am not bothering anyone. You are bothering me." Reynolds felt the air shift. It was subtle, invisible to anyone who didn't know, but Reynolds saw it. The way Elijah's hands twitched once, barely, like a memory firing through his muscles. The way his shoulders rolled ever so slightly as if aligning invisible sights. It was the coiled tension of something lethal deciding if it needed to act. Boone missed it entirely. His arrogance made him blind. He shoved Elijah harder, angered by the man's refusal to beg or bow. "That's it. You're coming in for disturbing the peace." The other two officers moved quickly, gripping Elijah's arms, wrenching him toward the ground. Rainwater splashed as his knees hit the concrete. One cop pressed a knee into his spine. Another yanked his wrists behind his back. Boone leaned close, sneering as blood trickled from a scrape on Elijah's cheek. "Not so tough now, huh?" Still, Elijah made no sound. Not a grunt, not a curse, only a steady breath rhythmically measured as though he were counting. 1, 2, 3. Reynolds froze, watching the scene unfold. He couldn't explain it, but he knew deep in his bones that something was wrong. This wasn't a homeless man being arrested. This was a trap set by fate itself, and Boone had walked right into it. As they hauled Elijah toward the patrol car, cuffed and bleeding, Reynolds' eyes met his in the mirror. Those eyes didn't hold fear. They didn't hold pain. They held only calculation. Cold, steady, terrifying. Reynolds felt it like ice crawling up his spine. Boone slammed the car door, laughing with the false bravado of a man who had no idea he had just sealed his own fate. In that moment, Reynolds realized the truth. They hadn't arrested a vagrant. They had cornered something else entirely, something that had been hiding in plain sight, something waiting. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm they had just unleashed. The rain had washed the city raw by the time the patrol car rolled into the precinct lot. The water had not just scrubbed the streets, it had stripped away the last of Elijah's disguise. Blood had caked at the corner of his eye, but his spine remained straight, his breathing unbroken, every ounce of him a coiled wire of calculation, shackled but not subdued. Officer Reynolds drove in silence, fingers tight on the wheel. Every time his eyes strayed to the rearview mirror, he found Elijah's gaze waiting for him, calm, unwavering, too sharp to belong to any broken man of the streets. It was like being pinned beneath the stare of a predator in tall grass, one that chose not to strike yet, but made sure you understood it could. Reynolds looked away each time, but the weight of it stayed in his chest. Boone leaned back in the passenger seat, smug and loud, like a victor in a fight he hadn't really won. "Did you see his face?" He laughed to the others. "The old man nearly cried when I kicked his junk down the gutter. Bet he hasn't had a decent night in years." The other cops chuckled, but Reynolds stayed quiet. He knew what he'd seen. Elijah hadn't cried. He hadn't flinched. He hadn't even looked human in that moment, more like steel wrapped in skin. Inside the holding cell, bleach stung the air, and the hum of fluorescent lights cut the silence. Elijah sat on the cold bench, his hands loose on his knees, his eyes moving with deliberate patience. To anyone else, it looked like nothing. To him, it was a tactical sweep. 2 guards outside, camera blind spot in the northeast corner, cell door hinges rusted, ventilation shaft overhead, Too narrow to use, but worth noting. Old habits didn't die. They sharpened in solitude. He closed his eyes, but not to rest. Memory was a weapon, and tonight it played out with perfect clarity. The jungle first, the suffocating green heat of Cambodia, insects crawling over his sweat-streaked skin as he lay motionless for 18 hours. One breath every 10 seconds, rifle steady, eyes never blinking. At 800 yards, he had ended a warlord with a single shot through the eye socket. He remembered the exhale more than the recoil. Precision was his religion. Then the mountains of Afghanistan, icy winds numbing his trigger finger, a convoy weaving through treacherous switchbacks, 3 Taliban commanders in one vehicle, 3 rounds, 30 seconds, no misses. The cold had bitten deep into his bones, but the kills had come clean, efficient, necessary. And finally, the desert. Sand in his teeth, heat radiating off the scope. Overwatch for a SEAL extraction, 12 hostiles in minutes, his barrel so hot he thought it would melt in his hands. The team got out alive. He had stayed behind in the dust, a shadow no one saw coming. Reynolds sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen where the classified warning had frozen hours before. He'd tried to clear it, he'd tried to explain it away, but every attempt had been met with locked prompts, access denied. He couldn't shake the colonel's voice from his head. Release him, now. It gnawed at him. Who was this man? Why would the Department of Defense leap to protect a homeless drifter in the middle of the night? He wanted to dig deeper, but his instincts screamed that curiosity would cost him more than his badge. And yet, curiosity pulled harder. In the shadows of the cell, Elijah watched the tension unfold, the way Reynolds couldn't stop glancing at him, the way Boone strutted too loud to hide his unease. Elijah didn't need words. He cataloged, he studied, he prepared. By noon, the precinct had thinned. Calls pulled patrol units back into the wet streets, and the air grew quieter, brittle with unease. Boone strode into the holding area again, baton spinning in his hand. He rapped it against the bars with a metallic clang that echoed like a shot. "Wake up, soldier boy," Boone drawled. "Guess what I found out about you?" Elijah lifted his gaze, unblinking. "You're nobody," Boone continued, swagger in every syllable. "Some ghost story the Pentagon cooked up. But this..." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a photo. A black and white surveillance shot of Elijah years younger, rifle in hand, crouched on a rooftop in some desert city. "This little souvenir says different, and guess who slipped it to me? A man with more money than God. Name ring a bell? Victor Langston." At the sound of the name, Elijah's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. A flicker, but enough to make Reynolds' chest tighten. "Yeah, that's right," Boone smirked, misreading the silence as fear. "Langston says you cost him a fortune overseas, says you took something from him. No, he wants you delivered. Alive, if possible, but he ain't picky." The silence in the precinct thickened. The other officers pretended to shuffle papers, but they were listening. Reynolds' stomach dropped. Langston, he knew the name too. Whispers around the department. An untouchable. A ghost who pulled strings in the dark, laundering blood money through real estate and ports. Elijah spoke finally, his voice steady, his words precise. "Langston is a parasite, and parasites spread." Boone laughed, leaning closer to the bars. "Not your problem anymore. You're in my house now. My rules." He shoved the photo through the bars, letting it flutter to the floor at Elijah's feet. "You'll be someone's payday soon." Elijah lowered his eyes to the photograph. He remembered that rooftop, the dry wind, the moment his trigger broke, and a man's empire shattered with it. He remembered walking away, not as a soldier, but as a ghost carrying too many kills to ever be called human again. He bent slowly, picked up the photo, and studied it for a long moment. Then, with a precision that chilled everyone watching, he tore it in half. His eyes rose to Boone's. No anger, no fear, only inevitability. "You should leave me alone." The words landed like a prophecy. Boone chuckled, but there was a crack in his bravado now, a tremor in his grin. He turned away too quickly, tossing his baton into the air like a nervous tick. The other officers avoided Elijah's gaze entirely. Reynolds sat frozen. His conscience screamed louder than ever. He wanted to tell Boone to stop. He wanted to tell him they were making the biggest mistake of their lives. But his badge was heavy on his chest, and his fear was heavier. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly though the rain had stopped. It rolled across the city like a warning drum, low and steady. Elijah leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes again. He looked at peace, but Reynolds knew better. That wasn't peace. That was a hunter waiting for the cage to open. And somewhere in a glass tower miles away, Victor Langston was already sharpening the knife. Preparing to finish the war Elijah Carter had begun years ago. The city's veins ran thick with neon and smoke that night, but in the shadows where no light reached, whispers traveled faster than sirens. Victor Langston sat in his penthouse office, glass walls overlooking the sprawl of his empire. On his desk, a tumbler of bourbon trembled with the impact of his fist. Across the room, his security chief Mills replayed the grainy footage from the alley. 4 men down in under 30 seconds. 1 man standing. 1 man walking away as calmly as if he'd just bought groceries. "Play it again," Langston demanded. His voice was low but laced with a fury that promised blood. The video looped. The homeless black man, dismissed as refuse by the city, became a phantom of violence, dismantling trained muscle with clinical precision. Bones broke like dry branches, blades turned against their owners. A gun was fired once, twice, but only into its wielder's chest. 27 seconds. Then silence. Langston leaned forward, jaw tight. "Elijah Carter. 5 years ago I told the agency I wanted him dead. They told me he was retired." Retired. His laugh was sharp and bitter. "Men like him don't retire, they wait." Mills shifted uneasily. "Sir, your teams are deschmuzz." Langston snapped, slamming the laptop shut. "This isn't some street thug. This is the most lethal sniper Green Berets ever fielded. He doesn't miss, Mills. He doesn't stop. And thanks to those idiots in uniform, he's awake again." Langston poured more bourbon, the amber liquid catching the city lights. "If Carter is in my city, then every dollar I've bled to build this empire is at risk. Get me Marcus Weiss." At that name, Mills paled slightly. Weiss, dishonorably discharged from Delta Force, now leading a pack of mercenaries who specialized in black market exterminations. They were expensive, brutal, and efficient. But even Weiss knew the legend of Carter. Meanwhile, across town, the man himself walked unseen through the maze of alleys and side streets, rain plastering his jacket against his broad shoulders. He had gathered his belongings again, minus the dog tags Boone had discarded, and vanished into the city's bloodstream. But Carter didn't run. Running was for prey. He was hunting now, and Langston was already in his crosshairs. In a rented storage unit lit by a single flickering bulb, Elijah sat at a battered workbench, methodically cleaning a disassembled sniper rifle. Each movement was ritual. Inspect, oil, reassemble. His hands were steady, his eyes distant. Beside him lay a flash drive provided by Wilson, an old Marine brother turned pawn shop dealer. On it, property records, port schedules, offshore accounts. Proof that Langston had shifted from weapons to human cargo, children. That was the detail that made Elijah pause, the faintest flicker of something human in his otherwise impassive eyes. When he spoke, his voice was almost a whisper. Then he dies slower. At the same hour, Reynolds sat at his kitchen table, evidence files scattered before him. His wife hovered in the doorway, their daughter asleep in her arms. "You're not sleeping," she murmured. "I can't," Reynolds admitted, staring at photos of Langston's men, of Carter's classified file. Half the precincts on his payroll, Boone especially. And this man, Carter, he's not what they say. He's not crazy. He's something else. Before she could answer, a sound came from the back door. A click, a whisper of metal. Reynolds drew his sidearm and spun. Elijah was already inside, standing in the shadows of his kitchen. "You should fix your locks," Elijah said, tone flat. Reynolds leveled the gun, hands shaking. "Give me one reason not to shoot." "If I wanted you dead," Elijah replied, stepping into the light, "we wouldn't be speaking." What followed was not a threat but an offer. Evidence on Langston, proof of trafficking, corruption that stretched into the very department Reynolds had sworn to serve. Elijah placed a USB drive on the table, the word evidence scrawled across it. "You have a family," Elijah said, voice measured. "Langston will use them, he always does. Decide now which side you're on." Then, like smoke, he was gone again. That same night, Langston's mercenaries made their move. They didn't come for Elijah directly. They went for the rookies, the weak points, the ones Carter might value. Bishop, an old comrade of Elijah's, had already been dispatched quietly to Reynolds' home, anticipating exactly that. When the SUVs rolled up the quiet street, engines low, lights cut, Bishop was waiting in the dark. He didn't fire a shot at first. He didn't need to. 3 mercenaries went down in seconds, throats crushed, weapons stripped. The others fell back, regrouping. But their objective wasn't to kill. It was to flush Carter out by targeting Reynolds' family. By the time Reynolds realized the danger, Elijah was already moving. He left his storage unit with the rifle assembled, the weight familiar against his shoulder. From a rooftop 3 blocks away, he watched Langston's men surround the house. He could have ended them all right then, one by one, silent, clean. But something deeper burned in him now. Langston hadn't just provoked the soldier, he had provoked the protector. Inside the house, Bishop held the line, blood already seeping from a wound in his shoulder, while Reynolds rushed his wife and child into a panic room beneath the floorboards. "Lock it," Bishop growled. "Don't open it for anyone but me or Carter." Outside, a mercenary lifted his radio. "Target secure, moving in." The voice that crackled back wasn't Langston's, it was Elijah's, hijacking their frequency, his tone cold and even. "I warned you." The line went dead. A heartbeat later, the first explosion lit up the street. A car fireball. Mercenaries thrown like ragdolls. From the rooftop, Elijah watched the chaos unfold, rifle steady, eyes burning with the inevitability of death. Langston thought he had laid a trap, but Elijah Carter wasn't walking into traps anymore. He was setting them. Night rolled down over the city like a curtain of smoke, but out by the coast, it was thicker, heavier, a fog that clung to the earth and swallowed sound. Langston's mansion stood at the cliff's edge, a modern fortress of glass and steel, lit from within by harsh white beams and patrolled by men who moved with the efficiency of professionals. Guards swept the perimeter with thermal scopes. Snipers crouched on the roof lines. Floodlights cut ragged shapes into the mist. To Langston, it looked impenetrable. To Elijah Carter, watching from 2 miles away through the scope of his rifle, it looked like a puzzle he'd solved before. He lay prone on a damp hillside, the barrel steady, his breath measured. He tracked the movement of every guard, marked the rhythm of their rotations. He saw hesitation in their step. Mercenaries, not believers, men who fought for pay, not conviction. Weiss was among them, the dishonorably discharged Delta operator Langston had hired, his posture straight, his weapon held with the precision of someone who knew what was coming. Weiss wasn't like the others. He'd seen Carter's work before. He wasn't afraid of ghosts, but he knew how much blood they could spill. Elijah adjusted the scope, not on Langston yet, but on the helicopter idling near the eastern terrace. Its blades turned lazily, waiting for an escape that would never come. He could have taken the shot right then, a round through the rotor shaft to ground the bird permanently. But this wasn't about efficiency. Langston had to feel it. Langston had to know death was walking toward him. He packed the rifle, moved like vapor down the hillside, disappearing into the fog. When he emerged again, he was inside the perimeter, crouched near a collapsed section of stone wall. He set charges with practiced speed, small bricks of C4 tucked where no searchlight could reach. By the time he moved on, the entire northern fence was a string of firecrackers waiting for his hand. Inside the mansion, Langston paced the study with a gun in one hand and bourbon in the other. His expensive suit was rumpled, his eyes red from lack of sleep. He hated the feeling of vulnerability that clung to him like the fog outside. "He won't come here," he muttered, more to himself than to Weiss. "Not here. Not into this." Weiss didn't answer at first. He listened to the chatter in his earpiece, the nervous edge and the voices of men reporting shadows that weren't there, footsteps they couldn't confirm. "He's already here," Weiss said finally. As if the words were signal, the first explosion rolled through the compound. A flash at the northern fence, then another, until the guards were shouting into radios and breaking formation. The fog lit up in bursts of orange before collapsing back into darkness. Automatic fire ripped into the mist, but it struck nothing. Elijah moved through the chaos with terrifying calm. A knife slid between ribs. A silenced pistol coughed twice. A man disappeared into the fog without a sound. He never lingered, never wasted motion. To the mercenaries, it felt less like fighting a man and more like being stalked by the storm itself. Weiss barked orders, trying to regain control, but every command was answered with silence, with gunfire, with static. One by one, his men vanished from his ear. Langston's composure cracked. He grabbed Weiss by the arm. "Get me to the helipad now." Weiss hesitated. He'd seen operators break before, watched their calm dissolve into desperation, but even he knew this wasn't just fear. It was instinct. Carter was coming, and Langston was a marked man. They hustled down the marble corridors, boots clicking against the floor. Guards flanked them, but every step closer to the terrace felt heavier, as though death was marching in stride. At the terrace doors, Weiss froze. The floodlights outside were shattered. The helicopter sat in darkness, blades slowing. The pilot slumped forward, a thin line of red across his throat. Langston stumbled backward. No, this isn't. The floodlights on the roof roared to life, and there he was, stepping out of the fog like an apparition. Elijah Carter. Jacket torn, face shadowed, eyes black as gunmetal. His pistol hung low at his side, his knife gleamed wet in the light. "Langston," he said, his voice carrying through the night. The guards opened fire. Bullets shattered glass, ripped stone, but Elijah was already moving. He rolled low, fired twice, dropped 2 men before the echoes had finished. He came up inside their formation, knife flashing once, twice, a mercenary collapsing into his own gunfire. Weiss fought hard as any man could. His rifle barked in controlled bursts. His boots shifted with tactical precision. But Carter was faster, his movements stripped of hesitation, distilled into pure instinct. A kick disarmed Weiss. A headbutt broke his nose. A knee collapsed his ribs. Weiss fell gasping, watching death stride past him. Langston fired wildly, rounds tearing into walls, his face twisted with terror. "Stay back! Stay back!" Elijah didn't slow. Bullets tore through his shoulder, his side, blood dripping down his arm, but he walked through it like it was rain. He grabbed Langston by the collar, yanked him close, the knife pressing against his ribs. "You trafficked children," Elijah said softly, eyes locked on the man's. "This is justice." Langston screamed as the blade slid in, a wet, final sound swallowed by the fog. His gun clattered to the marble, his knees gave out. Elijah lowered him carefully, not out of mercy, but control. He twisted the knife once, and Langston's empire ended with a shudder. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. Weiss groaned somewhere behind, guards whimpered into radios that no longer worked. Elijah stood over Langston's body, chest heaving, blood seeping from his wounds. He turned, eyes scanning the terrace. Reynolds was there, breathless, weapon in hand, having defied orders to come. His gaze locked on Elijah, not with fear, but with the weight of understanding. "It's over," Reynolds said. Elijah shook his head, wiping blood from his knife. His voice was ragged but certain. "This battle, not the war." From the dead man's pocket, Elijah pulled a folded note sealed in wax. He broke it open, eyes narrowing at a single name scrawled across the paper. Victor Wolfe. Langston's last insurance policy, a message that the real power was still out there. Elijah looked up, past the fog, past the dead. His body was broken, but his eyes burned with purpose. "The Revenant Order," he whispered. "It's only beginning." And with that, the most lethal sniper in Green Beret history vanished once more into the fog, leaving behind bodies, fire, and a city that would never forget his shadow.